Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. I want to ask you something that you might never have said out loud, but that you may have felt deeply. Have you ever lain awake at night, right next to your wife and wondered, where did her passion go? Why does her energy feel so far away even when she's right here beside me? It's a painful, quiet kind of ache, isn't it? Because physical intimacy is never just about the body, it's about closeness, curiosity, affirmation. It's about knowing that this woman, the woman you chose and who chose you, still feels desire in your shared space. And yet, too often, men sense a distance that feels impossible to name. You might feel like something is happening in your bedroom, but not with you. You notice her smiling at her phone late at night, or drifting off emotionally when you reach for her, and a question quietly starts to burn inside. What is she really experiencing, and why is it no longer shared with me? Tonight, I want to help you listen more carefully to that question, not with suspicion or blame, but with curiosity and courage. Because if you have felt that quiet space growing wider between you, you are not alone. And what happens in the intimate corners of a relationship always tells a larger story. So let's breathe into this moment together, because what we're about to talk about isn't about blame or accusations. It's about understanding the emotional currents that often run silently beneath the surface of long-term relationships. When a woman's body is in the same space as yours, but her mind, her emotions, and her curiosity seem somewhere else, that is the symptom of something deeper and far more intimate than just what happens in bed. You see, the bedroom is where a couple's whole relationship tends to surface. It's the place where all the unsaid things, all the little rejections and forgotten affections, all the unseen needs gather like shadows at night. When we talk about 5 things wives might do in bed, but not with you, we are not just talking about physical acts. We are talking about disconnection, about distance, about intimacy that still lives inside her, but is perhaps being shared with herself, or sometimes even with an emotional space that does not include you anymore. The first thing I want to invite you to consider is this: her imagination. Desire begins in the mind far before it ever reaches the body. When a wife is lying next to you, but in her imagination she is wandering somewhere else, reliving scenes from a book, a film, a memory, or even imagining other connections. This is a subtle way her intimacy has left the room, even while her body remains beside you. We don't talk enough about women's erotic imagination. Often she may have vivid fantasies, a hunger for mental stimulation, but if she feels unseen or unappreciated, she may retreat into that private world. It's a way to reclaim a part of herself that feels alive, but where she no longer invites you, not because she has stopped desiring entirely, but because perhaps she has stopped feeling seen by you. This is not something to be frightened by. Instead, it's something to become curious about. When was the last time you asked her not what she needs sexually, but what excites her mind, what makes her feel alive, what makes her laugh unexpectedly or feel wonder again? Because if you have not created a space for her imagination to include you, she will take that part of herself elsewhere, sometimes even while lying right beside you. And so, the second thing she may be doing in bed, but not with you, is seeking comfort, not passion. Many wives, especially after years of emotional or physical exhaustion, begin to see the bedroom as a place for restoration, not erotic connection. She may turn toward her phone late at night, scroll endlessly, or even just pull the covers tight around herself, not because she has no desire, but because the space has become associated with rest, not romance. Comfort and passion are very different energies. One asks for security, predictability, a kind of soothing calm. The other asks for mystery, risk, surprise. If your relationship has fallen into a pattern where every night feels exactly the same time, same gestures, same absence of surprise, then it's not surprising if her body no longer lights up in Anticipation, instead, it settles down for comfort, a warm bed but a cool distance. And this is not because you are not enough, or because she no longer cares, it is because comfort has overtaken curiosity. The rituals of life, the routine, the schedules, the shared parenting or work fatigue have slowly shifted the bedroom from a place of playful possibility into a quiet den of recovery. So, if you find that her bedtime routine feels automatic, if she changes into the same oversized pajamas, if she curls up predictably on her side, with a book or a device, if she sighs into sleep before there is any moment of shared tenderness, this is your clue. The bedroom is no longer your shared stage of passion, but her retreat into comfort, and the two of you may have quietly agreed, without ever saying it aloud, to this arrangement. But beneath comfort, desire still lives, and what matters here is that you, as her partner, begin to cultivate the conditions for that desire to feel safe again and to feel invited. And then there is a third thing, silence. This one can be particularly heartbreaking because it is so invisible. Silence in the bedroom is not just about words, it's about the absence of emotional dialogue. You may both get ready for bed in silence. You may lie next to each other without checking in, not just how was your day, but how are you really feeling right now? What's on your heart tonight? When the space becomes devoid of conversation, devoid of those small moments of connection, then intimacy quietly begins to erode. She may still offer a peck good night or lie close to you, but inside she's feeling alone, unseen, and in that silence she may have learned to keep her deeper needs to herself. Here's the thing, we often think that intimacy fades because of some grand betrayal or sudden crisis. But more often it's the slow erosion of emotional connection, a slow turning away from curiosity and dialogue that takes its toll. And so tonight I ask you to reflect gently, compassionately. Has your bedroom become a place where silence speaks louder than connection? Where the physical proximity disguises an emotional distance? If so, it's not too late. But it begins with listening, really listening to what that silence is telling you and what your wife may not yet have found the words or the safety to express. As we explore these first three patterns, her private imagination, the retreat into comfort over passion, and the growing silence that has filled the space between you, I want you to remember that this isn't a criticism, it's a reflection, a mirror, because when you understand these patterns, you begin to see that your wife's distance may not be about rejection, but about unmet needs. And here's the invitation. These needs can still be met, but you must lean in, not with pressure or demand, but with curiosity, tenderness, and above all, patience. So as you gently open yourself to these reflections, I want you to pause and recognize something essential. Distance between partners does not happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, through gestures that at first seem small, through quiet habits, through moments where neither one says what they feel. And it is in the bedroom where this distance often feels the most pronounced, because it is where we come closest to our own vulnerability. Now, let's turn to another behavior that may be quietly unfolding in your shared bed, but that does not include you, her emotional multitasking. I know this may sound surprising, multitasking in bed, but hear me out. Many women, especially those balancing work, parenting, family obligations, and societal expectations, bring the entire emotional labor of their day into bed with them. Her body might be lying beside you, but her mind is running over tomorrow's to-do list, the conversation she had with her sister, the unfinished project at work, the emotional weight she's carrying for everyone else, and by the time you reach for her, she is already depleted. There is very little left for passion when she is mentally exhausted. This is not personal rejection. It is emotional exhaustion, and in many long-term partnerships, this exhaustion accumulates silently. She may smile and say she's just tired, but the truth is that her mind is rarely allowed to rest. The intimacy you crave requires presence, and for her to be present, She needs space to unburden that emotional load. This is where emotional intimacy is key, because before you can ask her to surrender into physical intimacy, you must ask yourself, when was the last time I made space for her mind to relax? When did I last ask what's weighing on her, not just so she could answer quickly, but so she could really exhale? You see, a woman who is emotionally multitasking in bed is not cold or distant by nature. She is simply carrying more than she can hold alone. And sometimes, by offering her a space to unload that invisible burden, you are offering the most erotic gift of all, permission to simply be. And then there is another subtle behavior, perhaps the most misunderstood of all, seeking self, soothing without you. This may look like her turning toward her own comforts in bed, the scrolling on her phone, reading, meditating, or even falling asleep with earbuds in. These rituals are not inherently problematic, but when they replace connection, when they become her nightly refuge rather than a moment shared together, they speak of a deeper solitude. Many women create these soothing rituals because they have learned not to expect tenderness or adventure from their partner. The bedtime routine becomes something she curates for herself, a playlist, a series of videos, a favorite book, not to disconnect from life itself, but to create her own private sanctuary inside a relationship where intimacy may have become predictable or stagnant. This is where many men mistakenly believe they are being respectful by giving her space. But in truth, the distance may not be about space. It may be about feeling emotionally neglected or taken for granted. And so I ask you again, when did you last co-create your bedtime space as a place of warmth, mutual comfort, shared ritual? Have you become two individuals living parallel routines, quietly soothing side by side while emotionally far apart? Because here's the beautiful truth, a bedtime ritual can be transformed. It can become a shared act of care, a favorite song played together, a 5-minute foot rub, a moment of eye contact and gratitude before sleep. These tiny gestures break the pattern of isolation and invite both of you back into connection. And while we explore these intimate behaviors, I want to bring you back to the emotional courage it takes to notice them without judgment. When you see her caught in endless scrolling, when you notice her silence or her retreat into her own comforts, this is not the moment to accuse or complain. This is the moment to approach with curiosity, to say gently, "You seem far away tonight, would you let me in?" These are the invitations that repair intimacy, not demands for attention or rushed seductions, but tender, patient invitations to re-enter each other's emotional worlds. There is something deeply moving when a man steps into this role, not as a rescuer, but as a co-creator of emotional safety. When he recognizes that her absence in bed is not about withholding, but about needing something he may have stopped offering, curiosity, novelty, safety, and care. So often I hear men say, "She's just not interested anymore." But what they are really describing is not a lack of interest, it's the slow disappearance of shared playfulness, spontaneity, and emotional dialogue. Imagine this. Instead of approaching her with expectation, you approach her with wonder. Instead of assuming she will turn away, you ask her to show you who she is again, not just as a wife or a mother or a partner, but as the woman who once delighted in surprising you, teasing you, tempting you. That woman is still there. She has not disappeared. She may simply be waiting for the invitation to come back to life, in a space where her imagination, her mind, her body, and her emotions all feel welcomed and celebrated again. And this brings us to the question of emotional atmosphere. So much of what happens, or does not happen, in bed is shaped by the atmosphere you co-create throughout the day. If your relationship has become transactional outside the bedroom, focused on logistics, responsibilities, errands, then it is very hard for the bedroom to suddenly transform into a place of passion and playfulness at night. Intimacy begins long before bedtime. It begins with a glance in the kitchen, a spontaneous compliment, a light touch on the back when passing in the hallway. These are not clichés, they are the ways we prime each other's hearts for closeness, and when these moments disappear, desire becomes harder to access. So ask yourself honestly, am I tending to the emotional atmosphere of our relationship during the day? Or have we both retreated into routines that feel efficient, functional, but emotionally empty? Because what happens at night is simply a reflection of what is happening between you all day long. As we pause here, I want you to feel into this awareness not as a burden, but as an opportunity. The fact that you are watching this video, reflecting with me right now, is already a powerful act of care. You are willing to see not only what is happening in your bedroom, but why it is happening, and that is where transformation begins. As you sit with these reflections, you may already sense how much of intimacy is shaped not by grand gestures, but by the everyday fabric of your shared life. The emotional atmosphere you both create through small interactions, quiet rituals, subtle attention determines whether your bedroom becomes a place of connection or quiet withdrawal. And so, let's return gently to another behavior that may be happening in your bed but not with you, the withholding of vulnerability. This can be hard to recognize because it often happens behind polite smiles and the appearance of harmony. Your wife may lie beside you, sharing the same sheets, sharing the same physical space, but she may no longer feel safe enough to reveal her full emotional self. This withholding is not always dramatic. It can show up in tiny ways: a reluctance to talk about her feelings, an avoidance of eye contact when you try to ask what's wrong, a deflection when you offer comfort. She may seem fine on the surface, even cheerful, even cooperative, but beneath that exterior there is an emotional armor that keeps her true self hidden. Why does this happen? In my experience, it happens when women have slowly felt that their emotions, particularly their vulnerabilities, have not been received with tenderness or care. Maybe she has opened up in the past and felt dismissed. Maybe she felt judged for having needs, or for asking for reassurance, or for expressing disappointment. Over time, she may have learned that the safest thing to do is to protect her heart by not exposing it at all. And here is where you, as her partner, have a choice. You can approach this armor with frustration, or you can approach it with compassion. Because when she withholds her vulnerability, it is not a rejection of you. It is a self-protection mechanism born from past moments when her emotional openness felt too risky or too costly. This withholding creates a subtle but profound distance. Even when you lie side by side, even when you share the same bed, the emotional intimacy, the sense that you can both show up with your full, authentic selves, can quietly disappear. And with it, desire often fades too. Desire thrives in spaces where both partners feel free to reveal themselves emotionally, physically, intellectually. When one partner withdraws emotionally, desire becomes harder to access because vulnerability is the fuel for authentic erotic connection. So this is not about prying or forcing emotional conversations late at night. It's about cultivating trust throughout the day. About creating an emotional culture where your wife feels that she can come to you not only with joy, but with her fears, disappointments, and insecurities, and that these feelings will be met with curiosity, tenderness, and care rather than dismissal or judgment. There's an intimacy that lives in listening. When you practice truly listening, not to fix, but simply to hear, you create the conditions for her to let down that armor. And when that happens, the intimacy you both crave can return, not as an obligation, but as a gift that she offers freely because she feels safe again. Now let's explore one more behavior, perhaps the most difficult of all: resentment. Resentment is a quiet thief in many relationships, and often it enters the bedroom long before it is ever spoken aloud. When a woman lies beside you but feels resentment, whether from past wounds, unmet needs, or repeated frustrations, her body may still be there, but her emotional connection has quietly checked out. Resentment is tricky because it does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like indifference, like routine, like politeness. She may still perform the motions of partnership, taking care of the house, the children, even participating in sex, but underneath those actions there is a withdrawal of emotional investment. The resentment builds slowly through all the times she felt dismissed, unappreciated, unseen. This resentment is not about blame. It is about repair, because no relationship is free of hurt, disappointment, or misunderstanding. But what matters is whether those moments are addressed, acknowledged, healed, or whether they are swept under the rug and allowed to fester in silence. If your wife lies beside you in bed, but her touch feels mechanical, her smile feels distant, or her participation feels dutiful rather than joyful, this may be a signal that unspoken resentments have created a wall between you, a wall that cannot be dismantled by simply trying harder in the bedroom, but only by gently and courageously opening dialogue about what has gone unspoken. When resentment is present, desire fades not because the woman no longer has desire, but because it becomes impossible to feel erotic in a space where there is unprocessed hurt. Erotic energy requires spaciousness, playfulness, trust, and resentment crowds out all three. So if you suspect that resentment may be alive in your relationship, your path forward begins with a simple but profound question. Is there anything I have done or not done that has hurt you, that you haven't felt able to tell me about? This is a question that requires courage to ask, and even more courage to truly listen to the answer. But in that listening lies the seed of repair, because when your wife feels that her hurts can be spoken and heard without defensiveness or minimization, healing can begin. And with healing comes the return of emotional closeness and eventually desire. As we reach this point in our conversation tonight, I want you to reflect on something essential. The 5 things wives do in bed, but not with you, are not about rejection or loss. They are signs that emotional needs have gone unmet, signs that your relationship needs tending, attention, care. But here's the beautiful truth. Intimacy is not a fixed state. It is a living, breathing dynamic between two people. It can be renewed, restored, reimagined, and by noticing these subtle patterns, by approaching them with compassion rather than criticism, you are already on the path of reconnection. You are not powerless in this journey. You can create the conditions for your wife's imagination to include you again. You can invite passion to return by cultivating surprise and novelty. You can dissolve silence by becoming emotionally curious again. You can help her set down the burdens of emotional multitasking by showing up as an equal emotional partner. You can transform self-soothing routines into shared rituals of closeness. You can soften her armor of withheld vulnerability by listening deeply and gently. And you can repair resentment by creating a space for her voice, her truth, and her hurts to be heard. And all of this begins with one simple but profound commitment to show up not just physically but emotionally, to listen, to wonder, to ask, to notice. And as we breathe together in this tender space, I want you to recognize something essential. The doorway back to intimacy is not grand or dramatic. It is made of small, everyday choices. When you choose to see your partner's quiet behaviors not as rejection, but as invitations to understand what she may no longer feel able to say aloud, you shift the entire dynamic between you. You see, one of the most beautiful but fragile aspects of long-term love is that it evolves. The passion that once felt effortless begins to require care. The closeness that once felt automatic begins to need deliberate tending, and this is not failure. It is simply the reality of what it means to build a life together. So let's stay with this question of what wives do in bed, but not with you, not to judge, but to understand. And as we explore this emotional landscape together, I want you to gently consider this next pattern, performance without presence. It's subtle but deeply impactful. Your wife may still show up physically, perhaps even initiating or responding to intimacy, but there is a kind of absence in her eyes, her body, her energy. It's as though she is going through the motions rather than truly participating. Performance without presence is often misunderstood. It can look like enthusiasm, it can sound like pleasure, it can seem like engagement, but underneath she may be disconnected from her own desires. Perhaps she's learned that it's easier to play along than to voice her needs or discomforts. Perhaps she feels pressure to meet expectations or to fulfill a role rather than experience genuine pleasure. This is not about deception, it's about adaptation. Many women, especially after years of unspoken needs or mismatched rhythms, begin to prioritize their partner's comfort over their own experience. They may believe it's their duty to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to get it over with, so that no one feels rejected. But here's the hidden cost. Over time, this kind of performance erodes intimacy at its core. True intimacy requires presence, emotional, physical, and psychological presence. When she feels she cannot show up fully as herself, desire becomes a performance rather than an experience. So, how do you recognize this? It's in the small details. Does she seem distracted even as she touches you? Does she rush through moments of intimacy without lingering? Does she avoid eye contact or seem relieved when it's over? And what can you do in this moment? You slow down. You ask not in a demanding way, but in a curious way. What would feel good for you tonight? What would you enjoy? Not just what you think I want. You see, when a woman feels that her pleasure matters, that her presence matters, that her experience is valued as much as yours, something profound happens. She softens, she returns, her energy comes back into the space between you, and intimacy becomes real again, not performed. This leads us to another quiet but powerful pattern, comparison. It's not easy to talk about, but it's honest. Sometimes when a wife has withdrawn emotionally from her partner, her mind begins to compare, whether consciously or unconsciously. She may compare this moment in bed with a different chapter in your relationship's past, when passion felt more alive. She may compare this experience with a fantasy or with something she's read or seen. She may even compare you, quietly and without cruelty, to another man, not because she wishes to leave, but because she feels that something vital is missing. Comparison is rarely about replacing you. It's about longing for a version of connection that feels lost. She may be yearning for the way you used to look at her, the way you used to surprise her, the way you once made her feel desired without asking. And comparison, if left unspoken, can poison the atmosphere in the bedroom. Because when her mind is elsewhere longing for a different time, a different feeling, a different level of attentiveness, you can sense it. Even if she says all the right things, you can feel the absence of true engagement. This is not something to fear. It's something to acknowledge gently. If you notice that the energy between you feels nostalgic rather than alive, it may be time to have an honest conversation, not about blame, but about curiosity. You might say, I miss the way we used to laugh at night, the way we used to touch without it needing to go anywhere. Do you miss that too? Would you like us to rediscover it together? This is an invitation, not to return to the past, but to rediscover what made you both feel alive together in the first place. Because that spark, that magic, is never truly gone. It may be hidden beneath routines, disappointments, or fatigue, but it's still there, waiting to be rekindled. And this is the truth at the heart of every relationship. Intimacy isn't something you have, it's something you continually create. Even after years together, even after children, work, stress, even after disappointments, you can begin again. You can choose to see each other with fresh eyes. But that choice begins with seeing what's happening right now, noticing where distance has quietly crept in, where ritual has replaced romance, where performance has replaced presence, where comparison has replaced curiosity. You have the power every night to make your bedroom not a place of quiet withdrawal, but a place of quiet wonder. So, as we sit together in this reflection, I invite you to ask yourself, what is the emotional atmosphere of our bedroom right now? Is it warm? Is it playful? Is it curious? Is it tender? Or has it become routine, silent, distant? And then, what is one small thing I can do tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, but tonight to make this space a place of reconnection? Because love is made in small moments, in glances, in touches, in gestures of curiosity and care, you are not powerless here. You can rebuild what has quietly eroded, not by demanding more, but by becoming more present, more attentive, more curious. That is where intimacy lives, not in grand declarations or passionate ultimatums, but in the simple, patient daily work of showing up fully, not just physically, but emotionally. And as we sit together a little longer, leaning into this honest, tender space, I want to remind you that even these difficult realizations about disconnection, distance, absence are not the end of a relationship. They are an invitation to return, to repair, to renew. So often I meet couples who come to me saying they feel stuck, as though the romance, the passion, the playfulness they once shared has slipped away and they don't know how to get it back. And what I always tell them is this: passion doesn't just slip away, it gets buried, under expectations, under obligations, under resentments, under fatigue. But it's still there, waiting patiently for attention. Let's stay with this final, very human pattern that some wives may exhibit in bed, but not with you: self-reliance. What do I mean by this? It's subtle but powerful. Your wife may have learned, sometimes without even realizing it, that it is easier, safer, less disappointing to meet her own needs than to express them outwardly. In practice, this might look like her quietly comforting herself at night, emotionally disengaging from you as she soothes herself into sleep, finding pleasure in her own imagination rather than in shared experiences, or even quietly retreating into private spaces of fantasy, entertainment, or distraction. Self-reliance is not a failure, it's often a survival strategy. When she senses that expressing her needs may be met with frustration, dismissal, or misunderstanding, she may slowly teach herself not to ask any more, not to hope, not to reach. Instead, she turns inward. She reads alone, scrolls alone, imagines alone, calms herself alone, until, over time, the bedroom becomes a place where she takes care of herself next to you, but not with you. And here's what's heartbreaking: many men don't even see this as a problem. They think, she's independent, she's fine. But emotional self-reliance inside a relationship often masks profound loneliness. It's a sign that your partner has stopped trusting that her desires, her needs, her vulnerabilities will be met in that space. This is where so many couples go wrong, not because they stop loving each other, but because they stop needing each other. They become self-sufficient individuals, occupying the same space, rather than interdependent partners who turn toward each other. Interdependence is the foundation of intimacy. It's about knowing that we can stand on our own, yes, but that we choose to lean on each other. That we feel safe enough to expose our desires, to reveal our soft places, to ask for comfort and connection. When your wife stops needing you emotionally, when she creates a private, self-contained world within the shared bed, that is a moment to pause, not in blame, but in awareness. And it is your opportunity to invite her back, not through demand or expectation, but through vulnerability. You might say, I notice that we've both become a little more self-contained lately, and I miss sharing more of this space with you. What could we do tonight that would feel tender, close, easy for us both? And here's where many men misunderstand the task ahead. They think the solution is to work harder, to plan elaborate gestures, to fix everything overnight. But what your wife likely needs is something simpler, something deeper: your consistent, gentle presence. Your ability to make her feel emotionally safe again, your willingness to show up day after day, not perfectly, but attentively. This emotional safety is what allows a woman to relax into connection, because no one opens up in a space where they feel judged or rushed. No one feels desire in a space where they feel unseen or unheard. So, as you reflect on all we've explored together, the imagination that has turned inward, the comfort that has replaced passion, the silence that speaks of distance, the multitasking mind that prevents presence, the withholding of vulnerability, the quiet resentments, the comparisons, the performance without engagement, and this final self-reliance, you may feel overwhelmed. But you shouldn't, because every one of these behaviors is an opportunity. They are not evidence that love is gone. They are signals that closeness needs to be rebuilt. And you have more power than you think. You have the power to create the atmosphere where your wife feels safe enough to invite you back into her private world. Where she feels that her needs matter, her imagination is welcome, her burdens can be shared, her vulnerability will be honored, her comparisons are unnecessary because your curiosity is alive, her performance can soften into authenticity, and her self-reliance can melt into mutual care. This is what it means to tend a relationship over time. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. It's not about avoiding disappointment, it's about meeting it with grace and patience. It's not about demanding passion, it's about cultivating curiosity. When you show up in this way, not as a critic but as a curious partner, you invite your wife to do the same. You become the conditions for intimacy, the safe harbor where both of you can rest, renew, and rediscover each other. So tonight, as you lie beside her, pause for just a moment before falling into old patterns. Look at her, not just as your wife or the mother of your children or your roommate, but as a woman. A woman who still carries her own desires, her own imagination, her own longings. A woman who may be waiting, quietly, to feel that you see her again, not as a role or a duty, but as a living, breathing, feeling human being. That moment of seeing, really seeing, is where everything begins. And so here we are, arriving at the quiet threshold of this conversation, a conversation that isn't really about bedroom behaviors alone, but about the emotional distance and closeness that define the spaces between you. Because the truth is, the 5 things your wife may be doing in bed but not with you, her imagination turning inward, comfort overtaking passion, emotional multitasking, self-soothing rituals, and silent withdrawal, are not about rejection, they are about longing. Longing to feel safe, longing to feel seen, longing to feel desired, not for duty or obligation, but for delight. And as you reflect on everything we've shared, I want you to understand that this is not a list of problems to fix. There is no quick script, no step-by-step technique that can guarantee your wife's return to emotional and erotic presence. Because what she is truly seeking is not strategy, it is sincerity. It is the atmosphere you co-create, not just at night, but throughout the day. It is in how you notice her before she disappears into the comfort of routine. It is in how you invite her imagination to include you, not by forcing closeness, but by inspiring curiosity again. It is in how you honor her vulnerability, how you soften her need to perform, how you welcome herself, soothing tendencies as signs of exhaustion rather than as accusations. You see, in many ways, intimacy is about being present for what is, not what you think should be happening, but what is truly unfolding between you right now. The question is no longer, why doesn't she want me the way she used to? The real question is, am I creating the conditions where she can feel safe, curious, and free enough to want again? This requires tenderness, it requires patience, and above all, it requires presence, not just physical proximity, but emotional presence. The willingness to listen before speaking, to pause before reacting, to wonder before assuming. When you hold this kind of space for your wife, you become more than her partner, you become her witness. The person who truly sees her, not just in her roles and responsibilities, but in her essence. That is where erotic energy lives, in being fully seen and still fully welcomed. But intimacy cannot be demanded, it can only be invited, and the beauty is this, it is never too late to invite it back. Even if you feel that you and your wife have become distant, even if you feel that routines have dulled your passion, even if you sense that silence or self-soothing or resentment have quietly filled the space between you, even if she seems far away emotionally or physically, you can begin again. Begin by noticing her, noticing the small things, how she holds herself as she brushes her hair, how she looks when she reads, how she sighs when she lies down at night. Begin by expressing gratitude not for grand accomplishments, but for the quiet ways she shows up every day, perhaps unseen. I noticed how tired you looked tonight, and how you still made time for the children. Thank you for that. Begin by becoming playful again, not forcing romance, but rediscovering what made you laugh together, what made you feel like a team, what made you feel like lovers instead of just co-managers of a household. Begin by asking, not demanding answers, but inviting conversation. How do you feel when you lie next to me at night? Is there something you wish we shared more of right now? And most importantly, begin by softening, letting go of expectation, letting go of resentment, letting go of performance, so that there is space for connection to breathe again. You see, we often think of love as something we have, but love is something we do. Desire is not static. It requires care, attention, playfulness, curiosity. And when you stop assuming that your partner's presence is guaranteed, when you stop assuming that her emotional availability is automatic, you begin to appreciate that intimacy is a gift that must be nurtured and earned day after day, moment by moment. So, as we close this conversation tonight, I want to leave you with this. The distance you may have sensed from your wife is not the absence of love. It is a call for deeper connection, a call for curiosity, a call for presence, a call for patience, and that call can only be answered by you, not by fixing her, but by seeing her. Not by demanding closeness, but by inviting it, because when a woman feels seen, truly seen, she begins to trust again. When she feels cherished not for what she does, but for who she is, her guard softens. When she feels that her imagination, her vulnerability, her longings are welcome, her desire awakens not as an obligation, but as a natural response to the emotional space you've co-created. This is what it means to love with maturity, to recognize that desire and distance, closeness and solitude, comfort and curiosity all coexist in long-term relationships, and that your role is not to control them, but to tend them gently. So tonight, as you lie next to your wife, I invite you to hold this entire conversation in your heart, not as a burden, but as an opportunity. And before you speak, before you reach for her, simply be present, notice her, feel her energy, and perhaps offer her a small, genuine invitation. I want to know what's on your mind tonight. I want to feel close to you again, not just physically, but emotionally. Can we start there? Because when you create a space where your wife feels safe enough to show up fully, you also give yourself permission to show up fully too. And that is where intimacy thrives, not in perfection, but in presence. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. Thank you for your willingness to reflect so honestly, and remember, the smallest shift in how you show up can create the biggest shift in how you feel. Together, here's to rediscovering closeness, playfulness, warmth, and presence, one bedtime at a time.